It's here! It's here! The Magic the Gathering IP crossover of the century, at least in my opinion, has found its way to our tables in the Lord of the Rings set. As a massive fan of the high fantasy setting, I've been waiting and waiting for this, and since it's finally here, I knew I had to nerd out with some videos. For this first one, I wanted to highlight the Commander Precons, which had a plethora of amazing new legendary creatures that could jump into the command zone for each deck. I wanted to do something a little different than I have in the past, so for this video, we are going to be looking at each commander and ranking it amongst the others. Let's start by looking at the themes between the 4 Precon decks. For the most part, I was seriously impressed by the design of these decks, and I've been playing them without upgrades and thoroughly enjoying it. My absolute favorite of the quartet must be the Abzan Food and Fellowship deck that is centered around food tokens and, by proxy, also centered around hobbits, which appear as halflings in Magic. My second favorite deck was the Grixis Villainous Mordor deck that comes with a scary looking Sauron as the face of the deck, but has a cool replacement commander hidden in the initial 99. Being my third favorite deck might seem like a negative thing, but it was honestly just impossible not to enjoy the previous two, so the Jeskai Humans deck is next. This is the aggressive deck of the set and does its job very well, as we'll discuss in a moment. The final deck in the pod is the Simic Elf-based Council deck that I feel had so much potential but didn't quite deliver on what the design seemed to want. Even then, the green and blue legendary creatures are most certainly awesome designs, and needing their own deck built around them as well. We're about to get started looking at each commander that can helm each of the 4 decks, but before we begin, I want to say welcome to my channel. My name is Seth Cross, and you can find me around the internet on Twitter and even Twitch under the handle TheSethCross. Remember that if you enjoy this video, the best way to let me know is by subscribing for more content from me and liking the video to help YouTube show that they should suggest it to other potential viewers. Comments down below are also a big deal for the YouTube algorithm, so feel free to let me know how you would rank these cards or what other legendary creatures from the set you're excited to see in your commander zone. If you want to really support my efforts, there will be links to my Patreon and my free public Discord server. Hopefully I'll see you in the growing active community soon, but for now, let's look at the lowest ranked commander of the Precons. Number 13. Aristor of the Council. This one being at the bottom of the barrel almost feels like cheating. I'm not sure if it was supposed to truly be a potential commander for the Council deck, but just happened to be legendary and both colors. This could almost have justifiably been an uncommon card, but we're not here to argue design, only analyze it. To start, we're going to focus on some of the positive portions of the card, such as the fact that the card is low costing and relatively easy to cast. 3 mana for a 2/4 body isn't a bad exchange, so Aristor works well as a blocker. Additionally, this is an elf creature, so leaning into the critical mass of the elf creature type is a potential strategy, though probably not one that highlights the card's abilities. As a card that cares about voting, this brings politics to the game, and the benefits for the entire table may make opponents overlook it as a threat. We also can't deny that a form of card advantage sitting in the command zone is great value. Sadly, the way Aristor draws additional cards is very wonky. It cares about voting, but doesn't initiate a vote via the will of the council, council's dilemma, or newly introduced secret council mechanics. Doubling down on how the voting mechanic is a negative portion for this card, there is a distinct lack of cards that will initiate a vote in Simic colors. There are fewer than 20 vote cards in these colors, and nearly half of those cards are instants and sorceries, making us question the repeatability of Aristor's worth. Finally, the payoff for voting also feels strange if this is your commander. You want people to vote opposite of you in order to scry more, so you find yourself voting for something that maybe you don't want in order to avoid a situation where you're just handing out treasures and drawing a card. Personally, I think Aristor might be okay as a value card in a deck with voting, specifically one that has access to white as well. The third color opens the option up to use cards that let you stack votes in your favor with additional vote cards, but seeing as we're ranking these cards as the Precon commanders, I must call Aristor the worst of the bunch. Number 12. Bilbo, Birthday Celebrant. Alright, wait. Before you hit enter on that comment saying that I'm the worst for ranking this card so low, hear me out for a second. After all, one of my pros for the card was the flavor that the activated ability needs 111 to life, which was Bilbo's birthday age at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings trilogy when he retires from the Shire to Rivendell. Let's also not ignore the fact that the activated ability has the potential to end games all on its own, tutoring out your entire deck of creatures or lining up any kind of creature-based combos. Of course, flavor and potential for discussing combos aren't the only positives to this card, as the extra point of life does add up over time. Furthermore, the Abzan colors work well with life gain strategies, which is shown very well in the list for the Precon itself. Lastly, as far as the positives for Bilbo, I'd be remiss if I didn't touch upon the fact that the card is relatively easy to cast at 3 mana, even though you do require all 3 colors to get it onto the battlefield. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Even though Bilbo is ranked just over Eristor, they are still leagues apart in being awesome cards, with Bilbo being the most awesome of the two. Still, there are some other cool cards in these decks, such as number 11, Éowyn Shield Maiden. This card really doesn't belong near the bottom of any list. It's honestly a bit of a technicality with how I rank them using pros and cons. The few times I played the deck with Éowyn at the helm, she did everything you'd expect her to do from reading her. I did, however, notice that I was able to keep fast opening hands the few times that I did play her, so that comes into play with my thinking. To start, since I highlighted card advantage in the command zone, Éowyn brings that to the table as well. More uniquely, I liked how Éowyn comes with the first strike as an aggressive commander, making it even easier to attack recklessly with her. Looking at some of Éowyn's other basic attributes, Wizards chose fantastic colors for this design. Caring about the human creature type in Jeskai makes the deck very easy to build, even without all the new cards from the set. Having blue in an aggressive mix is also a great choice, since it allows for some of the control that can help the deck thrive in the mid to late game, something that it would probably struggle with if it was just Lorehold colored. Finally, as far as the pros, the tokens being created with Trample and Haste is just the cherry on top of a very aggressive design. There's no need to wait to attack, we can do something every turn. Éowyn's ability is triggered. Sadly, it may be hard to trigger her the turn she comes out, as it does require another human to enter the battlefield. Add that to the fact that she's a 5-cost commander that's meant to be aggressive, a game with a slower opening hand can put her further behind than other decks. And finally, even though having blue gives us options to have some control and protection, this is still a creature-based deck that can struggle with board wipes and other kinds of control, so we need to sacrifice some card slots that would normally go to human cards and anthem effects to keep our deck from getting blown out. Number 10, Elrond of the White Council. This is our first look at a Secret Council card that I was more favorable than less. Elrond's design almost feels like it's too easy, as he's an elf creature in green and that is very easy to take advantage of. Also, his Secret Council mechanic is not an attack trigger but an enter the battlefield trigger, and blue has a history of elevating these strategies with flicker, bounce, and other similar abilities. And that's before even talking about the outcome of voting itself. Stealing creatures feels very blue, while +1/+1 counters has been a staple archetype in the Simic portion of the color pie for years. The Precon isn't built to take advantage of these as insanely as a fresh brew could, which is probably why Elrond is on the lower half of the ranking. Not only that, but a lack of evasive abilities when you're making creatures huge is a slight con, while the Secret Council also came up slightly negative in my thinking. When I look at cards that revolve around giving the entire table a choice, I believe the options that offer opponents something for collaboration to be better. When it comes to making a decision on removal, players who are getting something out of a card are less likely to get rid of it. I think of cards like Savala, Explorer of Return, and her parlay mechanic that gives everyone cards. Elrond's 2 outcomes are only beneficial to the owner. Sure, you can take a creature from an opponent and it can't attack them, meaning that you might be pointing damage at the enemy of an enemy, making one of them your friend, but you're still taking something away from them. In my opinion, the best political cards are ones that put someone else on your side, albeit only temporarily. Number 9. Merry, Warden of Isengard, and Pippin, Warden of Isengard. To start, I want to express just how happy I am that Wizards printed the Hobbit pairs as partner with commanders. Flavorfully, this was so awesome, and honestly, I could gush about it for an entire video, but not this one. I'm going to switch things up slightly and talk about the cons first, just to get that out of the way. This is kind of a grouping of cons that all get stuck together, but my issue here was with some of the rules text printed on the 2 cards. Triggers only once each turn, 1 or more, and activate only as a sorcery are some of my least favorite words to string together in Magic. For the sake of balance, I do get the reasoning for these words, but ultimately having all 3 phrases appear on these 2 friends just feels so limiting. Then, both of Pippin's abilities require him to tap, meaning that it is once again very limiting. Still, there are many more positives than negatives. Like some of our previous entries, these are low costing and easy to cast. The Abzan color identity supports token strategies very well, and both halflings create tokens. I touched on Pippin's activated abilities a moment ago, and despite the restriction of needing to tap for both and the timing restriction on the second ability, it's very powerful, and has the potential to end games. Meanwhile, I do like noting that Mary's ability, while restricted to once per turn, can be activated on every player's turn. Combining him with a card like Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff, means you can be making a treasure and a soldier on every turn in a round. Additionally, I love the idea of buffing big armies of life-linking soldiers, which Mary makes. As a final note for Mary and Pippin, if you weren't aware, artifact strategies in Commander are insanely powerful, and these two have the potential to be very deadly if you take advantage of all the payoffs in these colors. Number 8. Sauron, Lord of the Rings. The big evil of Middle-earth is undeniably a powerful card, but he's surprisingly in the middle of the pack when you look at all the other legendary creatures in these 4 decks. Honestly, his biggest downfall is his mana value. The Dark Lord costs 8 mana and in colors that aren't notorious for hard ramp. Sure, you can get him out fast with an awesome opening hand, like Soul Ring into a Signet, meaning you'll have 5 mana on turn 2. But it's hard to depend on that kind of opener in a 100 card deck format. Still, he makes up for this with an immediate impact, giving a large-sized Orc Army token, milling a few cards, and potentially reanimating a beast from your graveyard. Within the Precon alone are multiple 5+ power creatures, 7 of them to be exact, that can make you dangerous in an instant. Let's also not forget that Sauron himself is a big threat. He's a 9-powered creature with trample. Commander damage isn't always a reliable way to end games, but when you can almost chunk somebody down with 2 hits, I think it's a viable method. This means that he's a fantastic ring bearer option since he's got a great chance of connecting with someone's life total or getting blocked, and both of those things coming into play with options 3 and 4 of the ring. Lastly, we touched on this, but the deck is easily tooled toward mill and reanimation if you upgrade the Precon, and you can throw in some even deadlier options than what comes in the deck already. Number 7. Gandalf, Westward Voyager. There couldn't be a Lord of the Rings set without Gandalf, and the set boasts a large variation of our favorite wizard. This one falls in the Simic colors, and honestly I like his design better than anything that came with the Secret Council mechanic, despite a few of them appearing further down in this list. Gandalf really only has a single downfall, and that's the fact that he's a 5-mana commander that does virtually nothing when you cast him. Because he triggers when you cast bigger spells, I predict it will be rare that the first time you cast him in a game, you will also be following up with a 5+ costing spell. Even though that's unlikely, Gandalf does benefit from being a big creature himself, with 5 power and toughness. As we've said for previous cards, he also provides card advantage right in the command zone, and his ability, while not part of the Secret Council, does have something of a political nature to it. As with other political cards in this video, I look more fondly on cards that provide some benefit to the entire table, as that tends to make players feel less likely to remove it. Finally, I want to highlight that big mana spells in Simic is one of those archetypes that has quite a lot of support. Upgrading this Precon or building a Gandalf deck from scratch won't be complicated in the slightest. Number 6. Galadriel, Elven Queen. The face of the Secret Council deck, Galadriel, is a cool card that suffers from ultimately being presented in a less cohesive deck design. I've yet to play a game or see a gameplay video of this deck that didn't ultimately make me feel sorry for the pilot, as it tends to do little to nothing. Still, Galadriel is a solid card, with the only negative marks in her design being the fact that she requires another elf to enter the battlefield and can't trigger off her own entering, and the fact that none of the take an additional vote cards are available in Simic. I touched on this earlier, but if this deck had branched into Bant with the addition of white, these strategies would have become much more solid. At least Galadriel doesn't need other voting or vote matter cards to have a valuable payoff. We just need to cast elves. And those creatures are abundant in Simic colors, as well as support for +1/+1 counter strategies. I wouldn't be giving a fair evaluation if I didn't mention how the Elf Queen is card advantage in the command zone, or that she herself is a 4/5 body that only costs 4 mana. The last thing I want to note is that Galadriel doesn't need to attack in order to work, which means you can slap some Lightning Greaves or Swiftfoot Boots on her for protection, and let her command your growing army from the back of the battlefield. Number 5. Círdan the Shipwright. We're almost done with the massive amount of Secret Council commanders, and it's fantastic that they're only getting better as we go. Círdan is honestly almost perfect, with the only negative I saw being the same as the other Secret Council mechanic cards: lack of support for extra votes due to a lack of white in the color identity. But once we're over that, it's all upside, baby. He's an elf in Simic colors, and his ability triggers off his own entering the battlefield, both very well supported strategies for these colors. Additionally, he's a political card that can be beneficial to others at the table, meaning he might get a pass on the removal decision at the table. He's also card advantage in the command zone, which we've already addressed and said is fantastic, and I want to highlight his native vigilance. I consider the keyword mechanic to be massively underrated, as it enables a player to be more capable of attacking without worrying about being defenseless. Let's also not forget, putting a free permanent onto the battlefield is a very powerful ability, especially with green having several big game-altering big permanents. Unfortunately, the Precon itself topped out on only 4 big permanents to cheat into play, with my requirement to be considered big being anything that costs 6 or more. Still, this means that Cyrodiil is a perfect card to break off from the Precon and be the center of attention in his own deck. Number 4. Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, and Sam, Loyal Attendant. Honestly, I was surprised that the face cards of the Food and Fellowship deck didn't snag the top spot in this video. Of all 4 Precons, I have been enjoying this deck the most and feel like these two partnered with cards were the perfect design to helm the deck. Like with the past few commanders, there's very few negatives, and it's one that we've touched on earlier. Hard life gain decks tend to draw attention from the table, so running these two as commander of the Precon or their own deck means that you need to be prepared to get attacked often and sometimes for a lot of damage. But that doesn't make them a terrible pair by any means. The two cards complement one another very well, with Frodo providing the value and Sam enabling Frodo to have that value. Vigilance also makes an appearance on Frodo, which I cannot speak well enough about, but the Hobbit also gains some evasion if he's made into our Ring Bearer. As we advance in our temp count, Frodo begins to provide card advantage both natively and from the ring itself, and can start dealing more and more damage thanks to the 4th level of tempting. Both Hobbits are also low cost commanders and easy to cast, something we've discussed already. We've also touched on how artifact strategies in Abzan have a multitude of payoffs, so tweaking the deck will only give you more and more powerful options. My last pro to these two comes from Sam. The reduction of food activation costs is easy to overlook, but potentially one of the most important parts of the duo. 2 mana isn't a lot in longer games of Commander, but reserving that mana just to gain a bit of life to fuel the rest of your deck or reserving more mana for multiple food sacrifices can get very limiting to what you do during your turn. Sam's passive ability halves that cost, meaning that we can keep up with the table while constantly gaining life and keeping ourselves alive. Number 3. Saruman, the White Hand. With one deck's commanders completely knocked out, we're closing in on the end of this list. Once, Saruman was the White Wizard and a beacon of purity and wisdom in Middle-earth, but during the events of the Lord of the Rings story, he becomes corrupted, acting as a lieutenant to Sauron. He finds a way to breed Uruk-hai, orcs that are unaffected by sunlight, which makes them much more dangerous than their original orc cousins. The card helps amplify this by growing an orc army over time, every time we cast a non-creature spell. And just to highlight, non-creature doesn't just mean instant and sorcery. Enchantments, planeswalkers, and artifacts are all spells that can trigger Saruman, giving him the ability to be a very uniquely built spellslinger style of deck. If we want to fall into traditional spellslinger archetypes, Grixis colors do very well with this strategy and can work well with certain goblin creatures for value. Guttersnipe is included in the deck and a great example, providing some collateral damage and gaining a benefit of War 2 from Saruman. It isn't just goblins that get that benefit, however, orcs as well. So, the orc army token is harder to remove with Saruman on the field. Talk about a supportive, helpful commander, right? Number 2. Radagast, Wizard of the Wilds. Look, I'm as surprised as anyone that Radagast, a very non-centric character in Lord of the Rings and not the main design for the Secret Council deck, would be doing this well on this list. He's the top commander for the Simic deck. I think though, if we break down Radagast we can see why. Token strategies in Simic are very well supported, as well as big mana spells having ample support like we've mentioned previously. His ability makes flyers, which should never be overlooked as flying can end games, and unlike other cards in this video, his trigger can happen more than once in a turn while also being available during any player's turn as well. Finally, he has a decent body as a 3/5 for only 4 mana and comes with Ward 1 himself. While he doesn't provide instant impact to the board, at least he's harder to remove, especially in the early game where players may not have extra mana to remove him. Being a 4-cost commander that cares about spells being cast that cost 5 or more also mean he curves very nicely, being able to cast and then triggering his ability the very next turn. Radagast ranks so highly on this list due to having little to no cons, while providing enough pros that, while they seem simple, add up to being very strong and reliable strategies that easily work with the Precon and optimized decks. A Rishkar's expertise, for example, can spawn us 2 tokens, or more for running token doubling cards available in green, draws us at least 3 cards, and who knows what else if we drop a big enough impacting spell with the free 5 mana value cast. The turns get very crazy, super fast. And number 1, Aragorn, King of Gondor. For starters, and no, this wasn't a pro for the card since it's true for each and every card in this set, this thing is just gorgeous looking. The art is fantastic, and I can't express in words how much I enjoy it. It's even the background of my personal computer. But besides that, it's a very solid card with so many awesome positives. The one true king introduces the monarchy, a mechanic I believe every deck should flirt with, and a thematic win. A king brings the monarchy. That's just too good. Despite being in the very human-based deck, Aragorn isn't restricted to casting humans. While the colors do work well for humans, the identity also works amazingly with just token strategies. Tokens, plus the inability for opponents to block if we're the monarch, is awesome. And we can optimize the ability to stay the monarch with flicker effects that are very present in white and blue. Red even helps us get around the fact that Aragorn can't attack if we flicker him, providing many ways to give our king some haste. We can't overlook Aragorn's native keywords either, both Vigilance and Lifelink as a 4/4 body that only costs 4. We also get the same benefit that Eowyn highlighted. Blue gives us access to some control and protection in a deck that is most likely to win via combat damage. Jeskai is normally not my wheelhouse when it comes to color identities, but even I can't deny how much impact and how solid Aragorn's design is, and I hope to see many decks of the King of Gondor in tables that I play. There we go! A massive number of commanders came out for this set, and we've looked at all of them. I'm very interested in what you think about my ranking and my mindset when looking at new legendary creatures, so make sure you drop a comment below on anything you would change and why. Of course, if you enjoyed the video overall, remember to tap that like button to help YouTube share the video to more and more people, and attack that subscribe button for future videos that I'll be working on. If you don't want to miss any triggers, make sure you ring the notification bell, that way you get a reminder whenever I release a new video. I'm available for Spell Table games online via my free public Discord server, which is a growing and active community dedicated to providing a fun, inclusive, and safe space for everybody to enjoy the game together. Lastly, if you want to shout at me over the void of the internet, nicely or otherwise, you can find me on Twitter, and I'll provide links to both my Twitter account and my Discord server in the video description down below. If you enjoyed the video so much that you'd like to support my efforts financially, the best way to do so is via my Patreon, as I wouldn't be doing these videos without my patrons inspiring me to keep going with writing, editing, and everything else. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. My name is Seth Cross, and remember, gaming is for everyone. Peace.